성균관대학교 문헌정보학과 심원식 교수님의 발표가 있겠습니다. 발표 주제는 도서관 자료로서의 데이터, 연속과 단절입니다. 네, 여러분 따뜻한 박수로 맞이해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
쳐다만 안 계실까요? 네,
Okay, all right. I think we are all set. Good afternoon. Welcome. As a library educator, I'd like to give my warmest congratulations to the National Library of Korea as it celebrates its 70th anniversary and 10 million collection. As we celebrate this important milestone, I'd like to say two things. First, for the library, time is measured not in years, but in decades, centuries, if not millennia. So in that sense, I think the National Library of Korea is still in its infancy, still very young. So I challenge you to keep innovating, keep experimenting. Okay. The second thing is our message shall always be how great our users will become when they use us, not how large or how big we are. So it's very fitting that we have this slogan, 천만장서. It's not about us, it's about you, the users. In this talk, I'd like to discuss three things. First, I want to talk briefly about the big data revolution and what is being done about in the public and development sector, and also in the research community. Second, I want to propose the notion that libraries, in and out of themselves, are big data. I think you have heard about it in today's talks. And I'll give you three examples in order to support my claim. Then I want to lay out some challenges that seem to get in the way of the library becoming data champion as it continues its predominant role in the world of information. And it all comes down to my call to the National Library of Korea to pursue this challenging business of dealing with data. So, what is data? Or what is big data? The first diagram is from the McKinsey consulting company. So many people define big data as information assets that have large volume, a rapid rate of change, and a high degree of variety. Still, other people have kept looking up in the dictionary the whole inventory of the words that start with V and have added veracity. Actually, this is an addition from IBM company that deals with the unknown quality of data, and value, which deals with big data potential driving previously unknown insights. Now, these definitions of big data are not definitions in the strictest sense. Rather, they point to different characteristics of big data. The Oxford English Dictionary defines big data this way, as you can see. According to a scholar named Borgman, the definition of data, including big data, is mostly indirect, usually done through giving examples or giving known categories. One thing that I want to emphasize is that whenever we talk about big data, we need to be very careful about separating big data as phenomena and big data's promise of delivering insights. Just because you have data, just because you deal with big data, you gain great insights. No way, no way. But sometimes people seem to imply just that. What can't be ignored is the fact that data is growing, and is growing at a rapid pace. Our environment is increasingly wired, or should I say wirelessly wired, okay? To the point that all human activities are being recorded in one way or another. Someone used the phrase digital breadcrumbs in order to describe this trend where everything we do, online, offline, leave a digital trace through web servers, your views of websites, clicks, mobile devices, all of your reading, interacting with apps on your smartphones, sensors. Actually, there's so many sensors installed everywhere, including, I don't know whether you have noticed, when you go take a bus, there's a sensor which tracks where you took the bus when you get off. So when you get off the bus, went to a Starbucks, when you have an appropriate app installed on your smartphone, they know you're coming, walking right into a Starbucks coffee shop, okay? And they offer smart discounts. And eventually, the Internet of Things. Let me give you an example of how fast data is accumulating. I think you have heard a couple of examples in the past. Here's my example. The Sloan Digital Sky Survey is one important initiative to gather data about celestial bodies in space, stars. It started in 2000, about 15 years ago, and it's estimated that the amount of data that it gathered in the first few weeks of the project, 2000, was greater than all the astronomical data gathered ever. Imagine the volume of data that must have accumulated since then, because it's an ongoing project. I believe this is not an isolated story in one field of science. This must be happening in many fields of science. I think about that. At the same time, when we are overwhelmed with massive amount of data, we are also faced with serious problems of data access. Sometimes the necessary data doesn't exist. Even if it does, it's not available for use because of legal and commercial barriers. Even if the data becomes available, more often than not, it's not usable because there's not enough information to understand and use the data. So we have this ironical situation. We have tons of data, which is growing, but at the same time, we can't use the data. Now, I'd like to turn your attention to various initiatives in the public and development sectors that aim to take advantage of this big data revolution. Many of us have heard about commercial sectors' use of big data. And I have chosen to intentionally to review what is happening in the public and development areas vis-a-vis big data. Mind you that these are just a small set of examples, the tip of an iceberg. Here is a small experiment that I did a couple of weeks ago. I went to the Korean government's electronic procurement system, whenever you want a contract from the government. And I searched with a couple of keywords, phrases, and counted the number of outstanding bids for government contracts. The first word that I typed was big data. And I had more than 8,000 hits. Not all 8,000 hits translate into 8,000 contracts. Some of them are redundant. Okay? Then I searched with the phrase public data. And wow, the number really skyrocketed to more than 136,000 hits. Then I typed road work, which is essential. So I wanted to make some comparison. Okay. I learned two things through this small experiment. First, although big data is making a lot of buzz in the commercial sector, in the public sector, there is a lot more attention to public data, which is a good thing, I think. Okay. Second, although the number of hits for public data is less than 1/3 of those for road construction, road work, because of its sheer size, it still means that public data infrastructure figures quite prominently at the national government. So if you're looking for the best practice in public data initiative, you don't need to look further, because we have it right here in our country and in our own city, Seoul. The Korean government is investing heavily on public data infrastructure using all the available public policy means through legislature and also through funding. And it's also affecting local governments as well. You're looking at the national government's public data portal. The important thing to notice is the pace in which data files are being added, not necessarily the total number of data files. And this is the one for the Seoul Metropolitan City government. Despite all these efforts, according to a recent assessment by the World Wide Web Foundation, Korea's ranking in open data effectiveness fell from 12th in 2013 to the 17th among 86 countries in 2014. It received a relatively low score in the quality and impact of data category. So I see it as an opportunity for the Korean library community, including the National Library of Korea, to make a contribution in the future. About a month ago, our department invited a guest speaker from UN, who is a data scientist. And that was when we learned about this UN Global Pulse initiative. It's not a huge operation. Several dozen people working in several cities around the world, including Jakarta, Indonesia, Kampala in Uganda, and also in New York. But it's quite interesting that it focuses on the use of big data in order to better understand global development and humanitarian problems and to propose solutions based on big data analytics. The World Bank, which has a lot of data used for economic and development purposes, they recently published a report entitled Big Data in Action for Development, in which it lays out the potential of big data and big data analytics for development efforts. So we've looked at exemplary big data initiatives at the national and international bodies. There are also a couple of prominent non-governmental organizations. First, there's a charitable organization called Nesta. Does it sound familiar? Nesta, okay. In the UK, which just published a report called Data for Good. Over in the US, a new think tank called Data Pop Alliance has been formed that revolves around using big data to solving social problems. And finally, an organization called DataKind that has offices in several cities around the world. It was founded by a guy named Jake Porway, who is one of the prominent leaders in the field of data science. DataKind is an elite group of data scientists and IT people that is providing world-class consulting and service free of charge. So now we turn our attention to research data. Although Dr. Murayama has covered some of these aspects already, I'd like to point to a couple of facts. If there is one sector that has the best expertise in collecting and utilizing data, is the research community. Because for research, data figures prominently both as input for research and as final product. But there are also serious challenges there. First, the reward system in academia is centered around scholarly journal articles. You produce more research articles, books, conference papers, and patents. Producing and sharing data at the moment does not really count for your promotion. Second, unlike scholarly journal articles, books, conference papers, which have evolved over a long period of time and are fairly standardized in terms of their contents and formats, data comes in many different types and shapes. And lastly, research data is not yet integrated into the social system of scholarly communication system. Where to send the data? Who is going to certify that you sent it before anybody else? How to cite? How to disseminate? How to share? Now, these things are changing, although slowly. The most important change comes from national funding bodies, money, rules, such as National Science Foundation and National Institute of Health in the US, Research Councils of UK, RCUK in Britain, and Australian Research Council, to name a few. These agencies are now requiring data management or sharing plan to be submitted when they apply for grants. And something quite interesting has happened, especially in the US. That was, researchers were scrambling to get help to write up data management plans and actually manage data. Guess what? It was the library, and it was the librarians. They've got the most expertise in this area. And I looked up the Association of Research Libraries website to see if there are any job openings related to data. I found many, such as data strategist, which is quite intriguing, right? Data librarians, GIS librarians, geographic information systems. So data experts are in great demand, especially in academic libraries. In addition to this pressure from funding agencies, the research community is also introducing some significant changes into the system. These including creating system in which data can be cited just like journal articles and books. We are also seeing a whole genre of academic journals that accept data as manuscripts. Slowly but surely, data is becoming not second-class citizens to first-class citizens in the science community. Now let's talk about the libraries. As I said, libraries are already big data. In the next several slides, I'd like to talk about the library and the data and libraries. The first thing that I'd like to say is, again, libraries are big data. Here is a quiz question. You're seeing a large-scale discount store, a Walmart in the US, a Tesco store in UK, E-Mart, Home Plus, Lotte Mart in Korea. And contrast it to a typical public library. Which one is a more complex organization? Of course, the answer can be anything, right? A typical large-scale discount store has a stock of more than 10,000 items, products. A typical public library in Korea has about 97,000 books in its collection. And when I think about the data that support the operation of a discount store and a library, of course, a lot of people flock to discount stores to buy foods, merchandises. Still, a lot more people come to the library. Okay? And especially the library deals with, the library catalog contains the intellectual aspect of this human heritage. The interaction between the library and its users can be more complex than the commercial transaction that goes on between a store and its customers. Here's some facts. In 2013, more than 267 million people visited our public library system. In the same period, more than 200,000 million people visited cinemas to watch movies. 42 million people went to national parks. And then slightly above 10 million people went to watch professional games. Now, pro sports, and especially movie industry, get a lot of attention in the media, but not the libraries. But when you look at this number, you can say that the library is a really important place, and the library is a really close, an institution close to people. We get a lot of human foot traffic. Don't you want to know more about what happens when people interact with the libraries, books, and with information? I do. We really need to turn these kinds of interaction into data because they are really, really important and says something about us. I call this datafication of the library, of the collection, of the users, and the interactions. Libraries around the world are digitizing a lot of books of some importance and value. For example, the HathiTrust, which is the library community's version of the Google Books project, has scanned close to 7 million books. And you can tap into that huge amount of data through HathiTrust Research Center. The National Library of Korea is also doing a lot of digitization. All these digitized materials form an important part of big data landscape. And finally, this old-fashioned library catalog data that has been overlooked in some ways, both inside and outside the library community. But we are now realizing that this library catalog data is actually a gem, a treasure, because it can add structure and richness to unstructured internet contents. How? Through publishing catalog data into linked open data to which information as well as data can be linked. And as you can see, the National Library of Korea is doing its part. Now, the main topic of my presentation, data as library resources. I believe libraries across the board and around the world have managed pretty well the transition from a predominantly print-based information world to a networked digital environment. With data becoming an important part of our society, the question is, will libraries be able to embrace data as a resource and live with it? I would say that it'll be more than a transition to be able to do that, to collect, organize, describe, store, and service data. We have our own strengths, but we also face a number of challenges. In the next few slides, I'd like to show some of these challenges. First, some people say that data is a thing of beauty. But in reality, data is very messy, complicated, and so diverse. Data needs to go through a lot of processing before it can be properly used. Data experts say that about 50 to 80% of their time is being spent on just collecting and cleansing data, not doing any kind of analysis. Whereas information objects such as books or scholarly journals are pretty well standardized in terms of their formats and types, data is not. And without good metadata and documentation, it's practically impossible to understand data. Data is much more dependent upon technologies which were used in the production. This means you need to have detailed information about this particular environment in order to interpret and use data. And this adding information, metadata, and adding documentation is most expensive activities. The way library materials are being used is quite well understood. People come to the library or come to our library website, they search, they browse. They search, they browse the online catalog, they browse the physical stacks. With data, with so many new ways of new interaction. You can slice them, you can extract parts of it, you can mash it with external data sets. The question is, are we ready to support these kinds of activities? In some ways, it can change the notion, the whole notion of the library. It can change the relationship between the library and its users, the whole interaction. Whenever I talk to big data people, they talk about insights that can be need to be derived from using big data. When the library's main contribution is maintaining data collection and performing long-term preservation, that is our own strength. Will people recognize the value of those activities, even when we do not necessarily provide insights or analysis? There are some institutional challenges with print materials and to a certain degree with digital electronic information. We have requisite policy and market means to collect them, but we don't seem to have those means for collecting data at the moment. Whereas libraries have a comparative advantage in established printed and digitized materials, many other organizations have already established themselves in the case of data. National and local governments are already running data portals and rapidly expanding them. Research organizations are building infrastructure to store, organize, and share data. So it appears that we need to do a lot more collaboration with outside entities, a lot more than what we're doing right now. I'm not implying that we are not doing any kind of outside collaboration if we want to become a player in the data landscape. I searched and searched for best practices of national libraries doing some kind of big data projects. The Library of Congress is doing some work, but that's the extent to which I could go. So it might be too early to propose a concrete set of data strategies for libraries, including the National Library of Korea. On the other hand, one could argue that we are coming down at this too late. Here's a list of several strategic options that the National Library of Korea can pursue. Notice that they're not independent of each other. As I said, we really need to speed up the datafication of library data. But in terms of envisioning libraries' role in the big data era, there are more than several possibilities. We don't know about what the future holds, but we do know that in the future we'll have more data, not less. Just as people have started complaining about information overload, too much information, we will be complaining about drowning in the sea of data. But the problem of making data public, the problem of sharing, managing, and preserving data will become even more important. And I believe that the National Library of Korea, celebrating its 70th anniversary, and having been a staunch advocate of public access to information, will have to find its place in the increasingly data-centric society. And the time to act is now than later. Thank you very much.